We're here with Congressman Nadler from New York. We just finished the hearing on high-speed rail, and we'd like to hear your opinion as well on how we can open up more private sector involvement into high-speed rail, because we know that money is tight right now, and we appreciate that. And we appreciate the fact that there's a lot of private investment interested in this, and there seems to be a lot of impediments and bottlenecks. So we're very interested in opening those up as well.
Well, I think first of all that there are some impediments, and whereas TIFIA seems to fly off the shelf, RIF does not. There are some bureaucratic impediments and statutory impediments that ought to be removed for the RIF loan program. And there are other ways of getting in private sector. But I think one thing that came out of this hearing is the private sector involvement, PPPs and so forth, are no substitute for federal and state investments. You're going to open up more private investment when you have more federal dollars to anchor it, to show that the projects are practical, and so you can have a guarantee of or likelihood of profits. And I think I have to say that every form of transportation has been subsidized, and there's no free lunch. We're going to have much greater federal involvement in spending for high-speed rail and for other capital improvements, and leverage private investment. But private investment is to supplement the federal investment, not substitute for it.
Well, we agree with that. And one question I'd like to ask you: if the federal government was able to get some of these projects started and sort of seed them and get them off the ground, then the private sector can step in. Then the federal government could actually step back out.
Well, in some cases, yes. As I said, there's got to be a base usually of government investment, and that can set up the private sector for, in effect, financing part of the project. But usually, without a base government involvement, there's not going to be the private interest by itself. There may be some projects where there is, but not usually.
Well, and also the federal government can play a role in streamlining the process.
Well, everybody agrees
right away.
Yes, everybody agrees on that, and we did quite a bit of that in MAP 21, and we'll do more of that. The streamlining is something that has to be done and is being done, and there's general bipartisan agreement on that. Although the Republicans want to go somewhat further than Democrats do, because we have some objections beyond a certain point on environmental and other grounds. But there's a wide area of agreement, but that by itself just makes it possible. You still got to have the funds.
Sure. Well, and the one model we like to hold up is the high-speed one in the UK, where that project was actually led by the UK government, funded by the government in a partnership with an engineering firm.
Well, as I said,
and then they were able to sell a concession and get all their money back, and now they don't subsidize it.
Well, it depends on the market. Yes, you could probably do that in the Northeast Corridor. There may be some other corridors you could do that, and there are some you can't.
But in that case, they still had to get the first money and get the infrastructure built.
As I said a few minutes ago, yes, the government investment has got to be the foundation in almost every case.
And that's our history.
And again,
we build our roads.
It is our history, and don't forget, the reason that passenger rail is run by the government is because the private sector got out of it. Because the private sector couldn't make a profit out of it at all. As a general rule, that's why all the subways and the commuter rails are all government run.
Right. But they provide a public service. That's what
absolutely they provide.
People don't value that.
They provide a public service. They provide a service essential for the economy. You couldn't have our economy without the rail and the other transportation assets, and government must subsidize them or run them depending. And again, this has been true throughout our history. I sometimes when I hear some of the Republicans talk about the private investment the government ought to get out of this, they forget the history. It was the Republican Party and the Whig Party before it, more than the Democrats in the 19th century, certainly, from the construction of the Erie Canal, construction of a wide range of the American system, Henry Clay's American system of internal improvements, as they then called it. We now call it infrastructure. which was the Whigs and the Republicans in the 1840s, 50s,
And that was
60s.
the government paying for it.
Yeah, well, that was the point. The government paying for it. They called it the American system. Henry Clay called it the American system, as distinct from the English or the continental system, where the government didn't pay for it. He said, here in a democracy, in a democratic government, the people together will finance the necessary infrastructure or internal improvements in those days, so that the farmers can get their goods to market and we can develop this great new continent.
Because you can't have an economy without.
Because you can't have an economy without it. And then the Transcontinental Railroad, which is another government project, and then the interstate highway system, the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Panama Canal. All of these have been government projects, some with private sector and some not. The Transcontinental Railroad, you gave land grants to private companies, but who gave the land grants? They didn't pay for them.
Right. So how do we, I guess my question, what changed, and then how do we sort of get back to our history of?
Well, what's changed is that part of our political system has forgotten its history and doesn't currently grant the necessity for government funding of major infrastructure, and that's got to change, because pre-Ronald Reagan we used to invest about 3% of GDP in infrastructure. Now we're investing about 1%. China's investing 9%. Guess who's going to have a modern infrastructure that's going to make their economy more competitive 30 years from now, if that continues?
Ours is deteriorating, so you actually have to spend more as it's aging.
Ours is deteriorating, and you need modern infrastructure, not just to maintain what you have. You have to add, and the infrastructure is not just transportation. It's
water, and sewer.
It's water and sewer, and it's electric grid, and it's electronic connections, and it's internet connections, and broadband connectivity. All of this, and all of this has to be promoted.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time and your support for rail. We appreciate it.
You're quite welcome.